Hello, Internet! Guess who it is? It's your buddy Take Troyan, lead singer for Lifted Generation and host of the Lifted Panel podcast. So, I have a lot of people, I've gotten this nickname on the internet. I've been called Hot Take Troyan because I've got these radical, wild, insane opinions about things. Or rather, people think my opinions are radical, wild, and insane. I don't think my opinions are radical, wild, and insane. But I understand that a lot of people think that, oh, Greg believes this, Greg believes that, oh, Greg's full of shit. And so I decide, I get enough, questions, emails, tweets, that I thought it would be a fun idea to start a little sideshow, a little sidecast, in addition to the Lifted Panel, where people could ask me about topics other than just music, because we mainly just cover music on the Lifted Panel. Sometimes we'll talk about, we'll talk about video games or movies, but it's mostly albums, and so with that kind of format, it's hard to get to a bunch of different topics. So, people who are curious about my opinions on things, trying something new, trying a different format, seeing if my takes are really that hot. So what I'm doing is I'm taking listener submissions. If you have something you want to get my opinion on, my take on, tweet me at Take Troyan. Send me a message through the Lipstick site. Find me on Facebook. Just ask me a question or ask me a topic you want me to discuss, and we will see whether or not my take is hot. So it's up to you, the listener, to decide whether or not it is a hot take or a not take, as it were. But, here's how I look at it. Do you really want Edgar Allan Poe and Mark Twain to have the same opinions as every average Joe? No, you don't want that. You want artists and creatives to have out their opinions, because otherwise you're going to get boring, stale, run-of-the-mill, crap. You want artists to look at things a little bit differently than the populace, and you can think, oh wow, they were so ahead of their time, or wow, that guy was on way too much cocaine and he had no idea what he was talking about. But I'm straight edge, so I don't even have that excuse. Yeah, so format for the show is obviously very loose. I'm figuring it out with you right now. I literally just hit the record button and started talking. So I'm going to look at some of the list of hot take submissions I received previously. And I'm just going to pick one from the list and see whether or not my take is hot. So I'm looking at the list, and what is jumping out at me as a potentially hot take? Ooh, okay. So this is from Neil Johnson. And he argues that Kiss influenced more musicians than the Beatles, and wanted to know, do I believe that statement? So he's asking if I believe that Kiss influenced more musicians than the Beatles. Okay, so for first-time listeners, what a weird episode to start on, because why would you care about me as a person? But actually, this will probably have a very clickbaity title, so that's probably why you're listening. So for those who don't know who I am, hi, my name is Greg, nice to meet you, welcome to the internet. My favorite band is the Beatles. I've loved the Beatles since I was a kid. I would always put on my dad's Beatles records, and it was one of the few bands that I loved before I became a fan of music. But I didn't become a music fan until I first saw Kiss. And I didn't even think about going down the musical journey of starting a band and creating music until I saw Kiss. And there are a number of bands. If you watch their behind the music, they say, I liked guitar a little bit, but then I saw the Beatles on Ed Sullivan, and it made me decide to form a band. That's what the guys in Kiss all said. So they all started a band because they saw the Beatles on Ed Sullivan. But I've met so many musicians, especially in Nashville, especially in the rock scene, who say that Kiss was their gateway band, got them into music, got them to learning guitar, and so many people across the spectrum of hard rock and metal got their start because of Kiss. And so it's kind of difficult to say which one had more influence. I think if you're looking at hard rock and metal, after, Kiss's heyday. So if you're looking at 80s and 90s hard rock and metal acts, I think you could definitely say that Kiss is more influential to those bands. But if you're looking in terms of the spectrum of music across all time, I would say that still the Beatles were ultimately more influential than Kiss. I think, there's a lot of negativity against the Beatles these days because people just like swiping sacred cows for the sake of swiping sacred cows because, ooh, I'm going to be cool and edgy and contrarian. Yeah, I know, for a podcast called Hot Take Troyan, his favorite band is the Beatles. Ooh, how fucking edgy. His favorite band is the one that's really successful, that's well beloved by most people, and has a really rich legacy. He's such a hipster. I mean, geez, it feels like I'm more of a hipster for having to defend the Beatles amongst all the savages out there. So allow me to defend the Beatles. This is my hot take. The Beatles are a good band, and that people need to lighten up with their criticism. Of course they were in the right place at the right time. That's every successful band. There's never a successful band like, they were in the wrong place at the wrong time, but somehow they made it work. No, that is never the case for a successful band. That isn't how it works. It is a matter of luck, talent, and the cultural zeitgeist being in the right place to accept that work of art. Now, the Beatles, without them, without Helter Skelter, you don't have heavy metal, period. You don't have Black Sabbath without Helter Skelter. You don't have Deep Purple getting heavier. You don't have Judas Priest. You don't have Van Halen. You don't have Kiss without Helter Skelter. Helter Skelter is the, birthplace of heavy metal. That is the seed. So that alone, to me is, you can argue which band had more influence over hard rock and metal. But I think ultimately, the Beatles had more cross-genre appreciation than Kiss did. Kiss was mostly just appreciated by the rock crowd. You had a couple people who were on the outskirts of rock who liked Kiss. Like you had Lenny Kravitz, who is arguably rock. He's arguably funk, he's arguably rock, he's on that edge. And then you had Garth Brooks, who is pretty inarguably country, not a rock singer. But for the most part, Kiss's influence is strictly rock and metal bands. The Beatles influenced all kinds of bands. You had Elvis Presley covering the Beatles. You had Elvis Presley singing Yesterday. Elvis, even if he was around today, I don't think he would be singing Detroit Rock City. And, the thing is, Yesterday, the song itself is the most covered song in the history of mankind. Most covered popular song. I mean, obviously there's Happy Birthday and Auld Lang Syne and, stuff like that. But in terms of popular music, Yesterday is the most covered song of all time. And it's hard to argue with that level of influence, the fact that, you look at Panic at the Disco about 10 years ago, they did their weird Beatles-esque album, Pretty Odd. At the same time, you had My Chemical Romance doing Welcome to the Black Parade, which was a Sgt. Pepper's throwback. You have all these bands who are doing tip of the hats and nods to the Beatles, and that still continues. The first Click 5 album was that. The fact that you had Kanye wanting to collaborate with Paul McCartney and Rihanna, and the three of them on a track together. He wasn't calling up Paul Stanley to collaborate with him on a track. He called up Paul McCartney. The fact that, Macca is staying relevant in music to this present day, is something phenomenal, where I would say that a new Paul McCartney release is more relevant than a new Kiss album. And, I know that's frustrating to a lot of people to hear, but I think that's honestly the truth. And look, Kiss is a great band. They're a very underrated band. People really rag on the band for, I think, the incorrect reasons. I think if you rag on them for writing kind of lackluster lyrics, that's kind of fair. But I think what they did in terms of writing catchy, poppy, fun songs that were simple but clever, I think they're just a phenomenal group. And I think that the same people who criticize Kiss for being too simple probably listen to Minor Threat and thinking that they're geniuses. I'm sort of rambling, getting off topic because I'm still finding the format of the show. But long story short, I think because the Beatles have that cross-genre appeal, where you can get an act like Olivia Newton-John saying she's influenced by the Beatles. You can have Peter Gabriel say, I'm influenced by the Beatles. You can have all these bands that have Beatles influence. I think that what Kiss did was they upped the ante for what is expected from stage shows for arena level acts. I think they definitely did that. But in terms of sheer influence, I think just the shadow that the Beatles cast over music is a really large one. And so, getting back to Neil's original point, did the Beatles inspire more bands to be formed than Kiss? I'd really have to look at the numbers. I'd really have to examine. I think because I live in the bubble of the hard rock community, it feels like the answer is Kiss. But I think we can't underestimate all those baby boomer bands that just burst out from the blossoming of the Beatles, and bands that were inspired by the Beatles during the 60s that hard rockers might not be as into and might not want to talk about as much. But so many of those bands were definitely inspired by the Beatles and probably inspired to start bands because of the Beatles. And I feel that's the case with a lot of the first wave of hard rock. They were probably inspired by the Beatles. So, if you're looking at hair metal bands, then yeah, Kiss is the one that inspired more people to pick up a guitar. But if you're looking at all of music, I think it is hard to cast doubt on the influence the Beatles had. And so just because I am living in Nashville, surrounded by rock guys who think that Kiss is the hottest band of the world, and I get that, I think that I need to take that bias out of it. And remember, it's 2019. The bands that are gigging nowadays are, a lot of those baby boomer guys I'm just not running into. But if you're looking at like that wave of musicians, I'm sure they were all like Beatles, 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 Beatles. And I'm just not running into them because of that age difference, because of that age gap. So, I would, without hard numbers in front of me, I would still say that the Beatles probably inspired more people to start bands than Kiss. But I think in a particular genre, in particular, if you're limiting it to hard rock since the 80s, since 1980, which act inspired more people to form a band, then definitely Kiss. So, is my take hot or not? I will let you, the listeners, decide. How will you decide? I don't know. Maybe I'll do a poll. Maybe I won't. I don't know. Tweet at me. Tell me how wrong I am. At Greg Troyan on Twitter. Yeah. This has been the first episode of Hot Take Troyan. Later, folks. Bye. Oh man, that was really short. I guess these are going to be short episodes. There you go.